Hello, Internet, and welcome back to Bronies Remember. My name is Shaneth.
My name is Onyx.
And today we are delving into episode 7 of season 1 of My Little Pony Friendship Magic, Dragonshy, written by Megan McCarthy, and originally aired on November 26th, 2010. And this is the first Fluttershy-centric episode throughout the entire series. And as much as I hate to say it, it's not a very interesting episode.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those, like, you don't quite remember it very well. It's like one of those forgettable ones.
That's not to say it's a bad episode, because the premise is that a dragon has moved into Equestria and decided to take a nap, and his snoring is causing a smoke cloud to cover Equestria, and obviously this is bad.
Yeah, that's definitely not good for vegetation when the sun is blotted out by smoke.
Yeah, we're not going to delve into nuclear winter because the dragon wants to take a 100-year nap. So Fluttershy takes notice of this smoke and tries to go warn the rest of Ponyville because apparently she lives outside of the town a little bit.
Yeah, she definitely lives near the fringes of town, I would say.
And it becomes immediately apparent that she can't really assert herself because as she enters town and tries to warn the other ponies in Ponyville, they just kind of ignore her and just keep talking over her. And it's not until Twilight shows up.
Yeah, I mean, most ponies just don't take Fluttershy seriously. Most of the time, it doesn't help that she's always kind of a shy, quiet one.
She's definitely the introvert of the group.
Yes.
And that's kind of the theme of this whole episode, is that she's very timid, very frightened, very just not generally outgoing. And as we see throughout their journey towards the dragon, because apparently Princess Celestia herself had taken notice and had sent Twilight to gather her friends to go essentially evict the dragon.
Hey, dragon, you're evicted.
That's basically what Celestia has asked them to go do, because God forbid she go do it herself.
No, the memes about Celestia seeing something going on. It's like, Twilight will take care of it.
The worst part is she's not wrong. But anyways, as they move toward the cave that the dragon had taken residence up into, we see Fluttershy repeatedly not standing up for herself, repeatedly not asserting herself and how uncomfortable she is with the whole ordeal. We see her struggle to overcome even the most simple of obstacles, to the point where she can't even really fly despite being a Pegasus.
Yeah, and I guess later in the series we kind of figure out why she's a very weak flyer. It definitely doesn't help that she's a fraidy cat in the best sense, especially when it comes to dragons, even though Spike is constantly around her.
She even admits this towards the end of the episode, that Spike doesn't bother her because Spike is still a little baby dragon. And she has issues with the adult dragons, which is sort of comical in its own way. But given that her whole shtick is that she's good with little woodland creatures and little animals, I suppose that's still within character.
Right.
Now, there's not really a whole lot to go on here, because the whole episode is just a repeating series of sort of the same thing, reinforcing that Fluttershy is an introvert. But there's a lot going on in the background that I think is worth bringing up here, particularly in the beginning of the episode. Some of you may recall or may even play the app that was released to iOS 2011, 2012. It was a long time ago, but the game company,
Gameloft app, yeah.
This app came out, and it was basically Farmville, but for ponies. And one of the things you could do in this game was interact with the various characters And one of the ways you could interact with the character was you could play minigames with them. And one of those minigames involved basically kicking a ball back and forth. And we see this ball in the show. Right at the beginning of this episode, we see Rainbow Dash bouncing this sort of purple ball with white stars all over it, repeatedly trying to break a record. A record that is unfortunately interrupted.
Yeah, gets interrupted, and then we also get one of the classic fandom memes with Lyra sitting on a park bench in a human-like position rather than a pony.
Yes, as we've mentioned multiple times, the fandom in the early days latches on to the smallest of things. And in the midst of Rainbow Dash trying to break this record, we get a panning shot with Pinkie Pie pointing out all these different characters. And as the camera pans across the crowd, we see two characters on a park bench, one of whom is sitting rather normally for a pony. The other, Lyra, is sitting with her back in like the crook of the bench with her hind leg
almost reminds me of those images of cats sitting like humans.
Very much like cat sitting like human type deal here. And this became such an iconic thing. And if memory serves, it's this particular scene that spawned much of the fanon persona behind Lyra insisting that humans exist.
Yep, we get the anthropology song, which is iconic.
A very, very early iconic song. Don't really hear people talk about it much these days, but man, back in the day, it was a big deal.
Yep.
The other thing that's really worth noting about this is we get to see a lot of character interaction. And we get to really get a better sense of what each of these characters are all about. You know, we get to see that Applejack is all about helping her friends. We get to see that Rainbow Dash is very much a fearless sort of, devil-may-care type character.
Right. Pinkie is useless as always.
Very, very much the comedic relief character to a fault. And, of course, the only thing Rarity cares about is her image.
Her image, fashion, making everything look pretty.
Ever the vain character of the group. And of course, Twilight being sort of the de facto leader here, as being the one to organize this entire sort of trip to the mountain. It's really, really interesting to see that even early on, a lot of these characters have very well sort of developed personalities.
Yeah, it's nice to see the early stages of the development and then getting to know the characters throughout the series, even though sometimes the lessons tend to be the same lesson repeatedly for some of these characters.
Which that's
just
an
in
interesting
different
thing,
ways.
because in this episode, Twilight writes a letter to Celestia, as she does at the end of every episode, which I know we haven't really talked a lot about. But in this particular episode, she writes to Celestia that she learns it's important to be able to lean on your friends because without them, you may not reach your full potential. I actually think she misses the mark here. I actually think that Twilight missed the greater message that this whole episode has throughout literally the entire episode. And that particular lesson is mindfulness. Being mindful of your surroundings, being mindful of your own actions, and how they can affect other people. We see that
with others' feelings and needs.
Everything about the other characters' interactions with Fluttershy is all about being more mindful of not only how her behavior is affecting their goal, but how they need to be more aware of how she feels.
Right. Because it's definitely apparent that every other pony in this episode is just ignoring Fluttershy for the most part.
Which is something we see a lot of throughout much of the series. One of the things that I think is worth bringing up here is we're now 7 episodes in, and compared to even the first 2 or 3 episodes, we can already also see an uptick in the quality and animation. We see much
the animation is definitely better.
We see much better control over the rigging of the Flash models, and we see much more cohesive expressions.
Right. I will say the smoke swirling and stuff as they get closer to the top and seeing it coming out of the cave is definitely showing that they've gotten pretty good. The animators have gotten pretty good at the technical aspects of using the Flash animations.
Yeah, Flash animation is not the easiest thing to do. And I don't know how the animators in this particular show, like how familiar they were with it. But they've certainly displayed a very quick improvement, which I think is certainly worth noting and keeping in mind.
Yes. I also like some of the background props and stuff. Like, this is the first time we just see the rubber chicken that becomes iconic and gets named Boneless in season 4.
There's a lot of props in the background that we will start to see over and over and over again. Some change.
Yeah, some definitely change.
Like, we see the town layout kind of, I don't want to say move around, but it's definitely not very consistent, even in the later seasons. We see Ponyville's layout sort of shift from time to time.
Yeah.
And we see areas that are well established, like at the beginning of this episode, the crowd is at something of like a park or like a plaza, not really in the town itself, at least not the town center. But we'll see that again and again throughout much of the rest of the series, and it's almost never the same way twice.
No, I don't think any of the backgrounds are ever exactly the same. There's always something that's different because consistency is probably not one of the strongest suits in the series.
No, not when it comes to background elements. At least not outside of like really prominent locations like Golden Oak Library or like, well, I can't even say Sweet Apple Acres since that place changes seemingly every other episode.
It changes like episode by episode. There's always something different in the background. I would say the only other consistent place that I can think of in Ponyville is probably the town hall.
Carousel Boutique is also pretty consistent.
Yeah, Carousel Boutique is rather consistent.
We also do get to see Rainbow Dash's home for the first time in this episode. We get to see her little cloud condominium up in the sky. And apparently they have liquid rainbows.
Yeah, I just remembered the liquid rainbows.
The little brief commando pay job with the rainbows.
Yep.
So already we're getting to see much more about these characters, and we certainly get to see a lot more of them as the series goes on. But I do think it's important to note that, you know, the writers and the animators have wasted almost no time in really trying to establish just who these characters are and what they're about.
Definitely. Again, it's one of the more forgettable episodes, but you'll get those from time to time. I almost feel like this was a filler episode rather than anything meaningful.
Yeah, I would tend to agree that Dragonshy overall is more of a filler. I know it's pretty popular along, you know, for a lot of longtime fans. Yeah, especially among Fluttershy fans. But overall, it's not a very strong episode. And certainly you are going to get those weaker, less cohesive episodes like this one.
Fluttershy definitely has a lot better episodes later on in the series. This is probably like one of the worst ones she has.
she gets a lot of good episodes. I mean, I think this is actually not a bad way for her character development to start, because we definitely get a pretty good sense of what she's about. The character like her, I think it'd be kind of weird for her first episode to all of a sudden, right out the gate, she's, a character that we've seen to be timid to just immediately becoming much more assertive and dominant. Which does happen at the end of this episode. We do get a brief glimpse of her ability to actually stand up for herself in an almost comical way, where she flies up to land on the nose of this dragon and stare it in the eye and basically command that it stop bullying everyone.
I want to say bullying would just, like, the almost get off my lawn type moment. It's like, we don't want you here, go.
Yeah, I like that. But yeah, it's an alright episode overall. Not the strongest, but for the early days, I think it gets a pass.
Yeah, it would probably be a 6 out of 10 for me.
And I think that'll do it for today's episode. Join us next time for episode 8, Look Before You Sleep. Take care, guys.
Bye.